Hey, it's Rob. Welcome to Axel's Garage. Out here working on the Big Dummies K5. So this is what happened. Driving home from work, and he told me it stalled, and then he was able to restart it. So what happened when it stalled was he was making a turn, truck stalled, he just rolled through the turn, pulled over a little bit, turned the ignition off, turned it back on, started it, and it started right back up, and he drove home. So when he told me about that, I asked him, I go, well, how much gas do you have in the tank? And he goes, it's a little less than a quarter. So my initial thought was, you're a dummy, and the gas gauge probably isn't that accurate anymore, and the fuel sloshed over. He briefly ran out of fuel, and that's why the truck stalled. It used to happen to me when I had a K5 and I was his age, and I would let it run it down to empty, and then I'd make a turn, it would stall because the fuel sloshed over. So I kind of thought that's what his problem was. A couple days, or the next day, he went out to his truck to start it up, and it was cranking, no start. So I said, well, maybe the gas is that low when by the time you got home that now you don't have enough fuel to submerge that pickup. So we grabbed a fuel jug that we have with 5 gallons of fuel. We dumped about 4 gallons in, and he cranks, no start. So, like an idiot, now we have a decent amount of fuel in the tank, and I said, just turn the key on, let's see if the prime function works. Turn the key on, can't hear the pump running. So now we have a pump problem. So the pump's not running when he turns to prime, it's not running when he cranks. So the pump circuit on this vehicle, although it's simple, can be a little confusing. So down at the pump, you have your grounds. There's 2 grounds coming out of the pump. I was able to reach up above and feel. So I got 2 ground wires coming off of that pump module, and they're both going to chassis grounds, and they feel firm and secure. And then there is a harness with 2 wires in it. So that harness with 2 wires, one of them is probably going to be your power for your pump, and the second wire in there is going to be your fuel gauge, because when I unplugged that harness with the key on, his fuel gauge either went all the way full or all the way empty, I forget, but he said his fuel gauge did something when I unplugged that harness. And I unplugged it just to look at it, and just to visually look at the integrity of the wires, and I plugged it back together. So I really didn't know the whole circuit and how it all worked, so I said, you know what, and it was getting late one night, so I said, you know what, let me research it, and we'll take a look at it a different day. So I did some research on how it works, and so we're going to come out here and we're going to troubleshoot it. So we have a power feed that should have battery positive at all times going to your fuel pump relay, which is mounted on the firewall, and it's the only big relay in the vehicle, mounted on the firewall. And then you have an output that's going out to your pump. It doesn't go through an oil pressure switch like in the later model, the OBS style trucks. So it should go directly out to the pump, and so you can check your main power coming in. You can check that line going out to the pump. You could the power fed to the relay is fed by a fusible link. So if you don't have power at the relay, you could check that fusible link. Sometimes those fusible links over time will go bad. Doesn't necessarily mean you have a short. They just go bad over time. And this truck is 30 years old now. Whereabouts? It's an '89. So wherever we are, over 30 years old. So we hadn't checked anything, and the neat thing with this one is hanging right off that fuel pump relay, and I'll show you that in a minute, is a service wire that you can put power to, which will put power to your pump. I don't know if it's necessarily for service or for emergency use to get that pump running if something goes. And then there's the wire that's going to go into that relay that's going to tell the relay to turn on and off, and that I believe comes from the ECM or PCM or whatever kind of primitive computer they have in these trucks. There is a fuse in the fuse panel underneath for that, so you got to check that fuse also. So we got a meter, a test light, and a jumper cable. So the first thing that my course of action was going to be, let me check all my fuses in my fuse box with the test light and make sure I got power on both sides of the fuses just by probing the back of the blade fuses, and then come up here to the relay and let's check and see what we have at the relay, key on and key off. If we have power going out on that wire that's going down to the pump, then we're going to need to go down by the pump and see if we have power at the harness where it goes into the pump. And if we have power there and the pump's not running, then we know we got a bad pump. And when you replace the pump on these, you got to drop the tank. You should also replace your inline fuel filter, and we'll go from there. But when I told the big dummy I'm going to go set up and do some troubleshooting on your truck, he came out and he turned the key on, and he heard the pump running, and he turned it a little farther to the start, and the thing started up. So now we have an intermittent fuel pump problem, which really sucks. He's like, hey, it's fixed. And I'm going, no, it's not fixed, because it's going to fail again. And now we have no idea how to troubleshoot it because the problem doesn't exist right now. So I don't know what we're going to do. I'm asking you, what do we do? How do we figure out an intermittent problem like this without him breaking down and getting stranded somewhere? I don't know. I'm going to beat my head against the wall. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you the relay and what the relay does and how it works. So right here is your fuel pump relay up on the firewall, all right? And you can see you got some wires going into it. So you have, you got a black, you have a, looks like a tan with a white stripe, you got a green with a white stripe, you have an orange, which is the heaviest gauge wire in there, and then you have this red wire hanging out with a thing that looks like a blade terminal, which looks like it should be connected to something. This is your, I don't know whether it's considered a service port for diagnostic use, or it's for emergency use to get power to the pump when the relay fails. But that's that wire I was talking about. So when you connect power, 12 volts to here, battery power to here, it should directly send power, bypassing the relay, directly send power down the harness to the pump, which doesn't mean that it's going to work. If your pump is no good, or you got a bad ground coming off your pump's not going to work. But if all your wiring is in place and it's good, it's going to give power to the pump. If the pump turns on, the pump is good. If the pump doesn't turn on, the pump would be bad. So is it this relay that's intermittently failing, or is it the pump that's intermittently failing? I don't know, and I don't know how to troubleshoot it. Here you got your orange wire, which is your heaviest gauge, that's your power feed. And how this works is it gets power and ground from the ECM, and then when you turn the key on and it knows to prime, and it'll trip this for 2 seconds with the key on to prime it, and then once it's done priming, it'll stop, and then when you crank, it'll trip a wire, and that'll close the circuit again, send power to the fuel pump, so the fuel pump is running when you crank, and in crank and run position. So is it the relay? I really don't want to put a relay on it and not knowing whether it's the relay or not. The thing that makes me feel better about wasting money on a relay just in case it's not a relay is this vehicle, while it only has one of these relays, my wife's IROC has 5 of these relays in hers. So chances that we're going to need one of these relays anyway are pretty high. So I might just go ahead and throw a relay on it because we can't figure out what's going on. So I'm gonna probably order a relay and throw a relay on it just to see if we can get it to consistently start. And he's not going to use it. We're going to come out here and start it a couple times a day, or when we're doing nothing, we'll give it a start and see if that fuel pump is still running. Hopefully we'll get it to the point where we don't hear the fuel pump running, so we can try to do some troubleshooting. The only thing I'm a little confused on is the fuel pump relay itself. It's got its ground, and it's got 2 wires coming in. So that's going to be the tan with the white stripe and the green with the white stripe. And I'm going to have to go down on the pump end and see which of those wires is the pump end power. And I believe it was the tan, I believe is the pump end power. So that's the power going down to the pump. These pumps, they're thin wires, so the pumps really don't draw a lot. I'm gonna turn the key and try to find out if you run into an intermittent fuel pump. We know it's a fuel pump problem, it's not a spark problem. So it's a crank, no start, fuel issue, fuel delivery issue, pump not running, and now it's intermittent pump not running. So I'm kind of baffled. I'm going to see if I can find online a wiring schematic so that I know exactly what I'm looking at for the wires and when a wire is supposed to be hot and not supposed to be hot, and maybe throw that relay on it. I mean, listen, we have 2 cars that have 6 of these relays total, so having an extra one on the shelf wouldn't be a horrible thing anyway. They're only about $13, $14 for these oval. They're the oval 80s GM relays. They're common in a lot of the 80s GM cars. So any ideas, any comments, any suggestions, please put them down below, because I'm confused and I don't know where to start in the troubleshooting when it's an intermittent problem and now it's working. Quick video today for the big dummy. Trying to get this thing reliable for him, because I don't like to leave my kids with something unreliable. This thing has been rock solid reliable up until this point. Thanks for watching.